Put my timer on for you, John.
Sorry, John, I'll be out of here.
No, you stay there.
No time.
Yeah. So whatever. Exciting, I'm looking forward to it. So much going on here. Yeah. These days, we travel a fair amount, so, I'm going to look at my office because there's like emails daily. So people get, oh, she's out of office, and then I reply to her. In the end, I just let people know
Well, I need the tickets.
It's at 91. That was told when it gets to 100, we should.
So are you thinking, like a meeting?
Yes. And the speaker is, I'm just going to copy. Yep, Dr. Frazer.
Yeah, because I was talking to someone like, maybe we're going to meet Saturday at 6 o'clock. Who wants to come and then everybody's
Frazer. We have it wrong on our site. And we are good to go. Sorry about that. I had the incorrect laptop for streaming, but we are good to go.
Oh, we need to ask about the music. Okay. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Edmonton Northeast meeting for Friday, February 7th. Please stand for O Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love,
Us.
in all of us command.
Thank you, Sean.
With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
The Rotary Club of Edmonton Northeast acknowledges we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. Please be seated. Announce visitors and guests. Donna Nickel, please.
How's that?
No, it's fine.
Is that good?
No, just do your best.
Okay.
Use your mother voice.
My mother voice, yes. Get in the shower, kids. Okay. You said to use my mother voice, so here it is. We're very pleased to have Dr. Joy Frazer as our guest speaker today, and she will receive a more substantial welcome in a little while. We also have honorary members today. Al Fucher, Ernie Vercacci. It's so very nice to have you. And we have corporate member Michelle Draper is here today with her darling husband, Sean.
He is right.
Now, Shirley Smith has a guest.
I'm pleased to introduce my guest. This is Sabrina Hagelin. She's a cohort in dental hygiene. I worked with her when I was at university, and she's a good
Okay.
Invocation. Let us take a moment of silence in order to appreciate the gift and the fellowship of good friends in Rotary, and allow all of us in the sanctuary of our own hearts and minds to reconnect with the guiding principles that inspire our lives. Thank you. So just a quick question, or a quick comment before we do the call to the faith. I know we've had a couple of people asking, John, what's with your face? I just want to, nothing really bad. I'm getting some skin treatment for some sun-damaged skin cells, and the cream that I get to put on my face reacts with those cells and makes me look really red and splotchy. I'm not contagious. I'm not sick. It's just the way things are for another couple of weeks. So just wanted to dispel that notion. Call to the buffet, John Nickel.
All right, where you go?
Sorry.
So, in an electronic world, it gets tougher and tougher to do these sorts of things. But as is our custom, the head table goes first. And we do that so the president has time to eat before he's got to get up here and do all his shtick. Anyway, so the head table...
Can I interrupt? We just had two guests come in, so maybe they could stand up and introduce themselves.
Yeah.
That's all right. I wish.
We'll go together.
Okay.
So, and build our culture.
Awesome. Welcome.
Very good. And you are lucky because you arrived and got the seats at that table, which means you get to go and find out what we're having for dinner before the rest of us do. So the head table may go. Now, I've been visiting other clubs, and I've started doing my third round of club visits as AG, and noticed that people had a theme when they started to do the things like sergeant and table selection. So I have a theme. It's going to be called the Traveler's Theme.
Yeah.
Well, you may sooner or later one of you is going to win something. Who has been to the warmest place so far this year?
Oh, we were in Mexico after January, first week of January.
How hot?
Oh, it was very hot.
Well, no. 30, 35, 40?
Yes.
And I got to tell you, that's a true politician. They all were. Okay, Christine, where were you?
I was in our own suite. We have heated floors, and the temperature on the floors was 36.
That doesn't count. All right, who's over here?
I was at the expat of 36.
36.
Oh, that's a tie.
We didn't get 30.
Tie, you have to do another question.
All right, so,
Wait.
okay.
I was in the Duke.
That cut you.
I don't know what the temperature.
Minus 40.
Well, you know what? That's the answer to question number 3. So you're number 3. So I'm now down to question number 1 and 2, and here's going to be the tiebreaker. So who's gone to the furthest away place?
Melbourne.
How are you?
Oh.
Since January.
No, it's between these two tables because you're number 3.
Argentina?
No, Melbourne.
Melbourne.
When?
Well, this year.
Oh, this year.
Okay, you're number 1, you're number 2, and you're number 3. How about that? The question number 3 was, We went to the coldest place this year.
Edmonton.
And the Duke Alberta is
We
pretty
live
much
here.
going to be it.
But it was a good
I go to town, call places over here, includes them all the time. Trump? So it's only about 49%. Well, actually, next Wednesday, are you working at a town market? No. I don't know what
I guess we can get up and So the Wednesday nights are the
Yes, Melbourne. That was a far way to win. I thought that Nichols with New Zealand, but Melbourne's just a little bit further away than. They would have flown into Sydney and scored off at New Zealand.
Oh, yeah. Second hand.
Are you going by Vancouver?
Not touching anything from the
It's kind of unnerving when they take your passport away from you when you're right. You sit for a while. You're the most probably in the country. Efforts to go first. There's 6 of us. You might have to fear.
Yeah.
We had a visa, but we would have made that too.
We have needed a visa. You don't get into Vietnam.
And we have millions of dollars.
I know.
So many years,
Millions.
We only got, I think, $100 and we have $1 million.
Yeah.
What is it, 10,000?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, she's doing good now. She did great. Yeah, so we're not the only program.
We are.
But she's
No, there was an agency going.
The service used to be too.
They didn't renew?
I think.
Really?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Well, and he's going. Every time I talk to him, he's got another project. He donates all of his old bread to the C5 farm just north of there. And it's all taken by the immigrant family within an hour.
We used to get crops. Crops. I don't know if they still do or not. We used to donate some boys and girls clubs. We had to have a volunteer pick it up. Like late at night, 10 o'clock. Like after the start.
That's when I started staying with them.
Yeah, it was hard to get a volunteer to go.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know.
And he said, no.
Some friends of ours, they're not fun.
But it was easier to get rid of in our clubs.
Well, I know, that's the problem.
So how does it work?
That's the big Yeah.
Well, you can't do
and if they were all big old.
That's
Need some more bodies. Now, we've got the charter night.
Play with Ada. Well, they're actually well, they're just.
So Bill, what do you drink? Beer?
So they're technically.
Pick some white wine. You get a bottle
That's something I think it's not the best wine, something you should make sure. You can pay more than you want to order like better quality. Our second day, the next time that we put lunch on one of the beds, we go, so much to talk about that, we got all the sundress on, the wine was pouring, it was so good, and the meal, and it was delicious, and then went back, our suits on, and I fell asleep in the sun. I woke up with the worst headache I've ever had. That night, I think I was in bed by 8 o'clock. I said, okay, no more wine at lunch. Now I'm going to do it at lunch. It was a falling asleep after. No, at one time he had like 10 people that come up and we were having a little sing-along.
That's fun.
Wasn't a new school, is it?
Oh, yeah.
I managed to get through it.
Sean, you need to you're doing some more solos. So you're playing melody in the harmonies and that. Just people will pick up on solos and melody comes through. Yeah, when you 5
Booking my son for a music I tried to do it a couple of years ago.
You'll have a little more experience. You'll understand the same.
Of course, that was
That's like your
Start talking 1, 4, 5 seconds. Goes over most people's heads. They have really nice. You know what I'll share it with you?
Just add so many colors.
I'll share it with you. We're not having for dinner tonight, so we drop over. What would you like to have? We're not having ribs. So he made us cook. Yeah, it's more preparation. But it was fun. It was great.
Yeah, it was good. Regular type of deal, but it was fun. And then Andrea brought holiness and sausage pie. Oh, like I thought, this pie, I was like, before I bit it, it was like it was disintegrating. I've never tasted like over pies and Mark makes some of the blueberry pie. That someone else did a pie. It was like, oh, my friend here was miles and miles by. Whole meat pie, that's back in the and yet it was like this also bold and it was just whatever. It was like really good. And when you start putting it and
So yeah, they make me jealous. I love
and
sausage.
hold it
Yes. Michael, you remember Michael Blue? Came to Sean's place too. Yeah,
That's good. You go on son, and he says, oh, we're trying 95 rooms. So my friend, I can afford to enter a nightmare. Like this. Hold on. So then he's like this. All of a sudden you see his face, and it's like this, and his throat started. 951 or something. So then I just read mine a little bit, and I felt like bust. My friend, he struggled for about 5 minutes. And then I took another picture of these ones on the higher number. My son goes, that's where the real hot ones are. I mean, hot can hot be because first you feel those pictures. But some of you really make some gas and stuff on hot and like that.
First time I ever had a nail sauce on there. It's not even hot.
There's that place in the wall by the airport, all the strictly hot spots.
Rolling around on the floor. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. That's hilarious. Oh, that's great. It's basically a lot of
What do they call it?
Look at these. Seven-headed rhino.
Well, they are you read that chicken stuff, you know, it's all that Carolina Panther video. There's just one chicken in a box. And the box is one chicken. It's supposed to super white. So anyways, my boys tried it. I tried to buy it. I've never been able to buy it. So they had chocolate bar chicken. Shaquille O'Neal on the basketball broadcast tonight. So Shaquille O'Neal prints the box. So he eats the whole chip like that. So he's like, that's not a big deal. All of a sudden, you just see his face, and he starts panicking. He's running on the set because he's running for his glass of milk or something like that. He like was really in panic. Oh, is it funny? And so they kept showing you next time. I go through the rest of the broadcast, but the next one, he's like, not but I think it's an acquired taste. You gotta gradually.
Brought up being expensive.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while, you have to sign a waiver.
Well, there are some peppers.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have our guest speaker introduction in 2 minutes. If you want to charge your coffee, tea, or go get a second dessert. For those of you.
He said he's writing out, but then after I got put it in plastic bag and something along the lines. One time I
Sunscreen, and then I'm getting rub in my eye or something. You know, it stings.
Oh,
I use SPF 60.
Seems like it's been so long. Hello, how are you doing? You snuck in.
You're good?
I'm doing okay.
You're awesome.
Oh, I'll have to sneak in. You done getting up with us for work? Are you done? I need to run.
I'm more of a 305 than a 505. I don't know what it is. Is that my watch 5? Wait. Oh, wait. Wait, I like everybody wait. No. You still have all
Just fine.
exercises, Bill? Well, you know what'll happen if you stop. A friend of mine, my son-in-law, a friend of his was a big-time trainer. No, it's another one. It's another one. This is another guy. No, he's a trainer for the Stars. Anyway, Chelsea Handling, if you know her, she's a riot. He's so bad. He had a video of her working out. One foot on a rebounder. And doing lunges off his rebounder. Just the trainer's video, we just showed him training, and let us see it. Oh, yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to introduce Dr. Joy Frazer. We're just looking at the logistics of her speaker or her microphone. But did you all receive her bio in an email I sent out? Okay, because it's quite a lengthy bio.
Don't even bother.
Yeah, no, I sent it out because it's so impressive, your bio. But I think Joy is a prime example of an awesome Rotarian. She's not a Rotarian, but I think she would make an awesome Rotarian, just from her experience. Since 1999, Joy has been an international consultant for the Kigali Health Institute in Rwanda, for the Canadian University in Dubai, and for the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. She focuses mainly on strategic planning, program development, evaluation, and accreditation. She has been the senior consultant for WHO in Kuwait and Iraq since 2016, where she led the development of a 10-year strategic plan for nursing and midwifery. In 2018, Joy was the senior international consultant in the capacity building mission to improve the quality of care in the liberated and impacted communities of Mosul and Difar. Her current mission is to update the Iraq strategic plan for nursing and midwifery. I guess. Please welcome Dr. Joy Frazer.
Thank you, Shirley. Welcome, everybody. Actually, what I say about myself is I'm a Saskatchewan farm girl. That's it.
I forgot to mention that. My mom lives in North Balford and her mom lives in North Balford. Oh, it's a small world.
It's a very small world. So, nobody can.
So we now have a microphone, but where we're challenged somewhat with, is that picking up at all?
Yeah,
You're gonna have to try it. You're gonna have to.
yeah, you don't put it inside your mouth.
Use the wardrobe assistant.
Oh, yeah, you probably need that too.
Give it a shot. You have to be quiet so we can listen.
So this is my agenda. If you can't hear me, please let me know. If you have questions along the way, please stop and ask them. We will have questions at the end, but sometimes things come up and you really want to know something, so just ask. So anytime anybody finds out that I've worked and I'm doing projects with the UN, they always ask me, well, how did that happen? So I'm going to talk a little bit about my background, just generally, quickly, and then I'll tell you about some of the work I've done with the UN, and then again I'll go over the original mission in Iraq and then some of the follow-up stuff that we've been doing since then, and I'll talk about the challenges and successes. So my background, I'm a nurse. I graduated many, many decades ago, like almost 50 years from nursing. I started working as a registered nurse when I was 19, so I've worked in many different capacities as an RN. And then I went to work at Athabasca University, where I was for almost 30 years. And during that time, I was director of nursing for the nursing program and the Master of Health Studies program. And then I was seconded over into Health Admin. I had actually worked in Health Admin quite a lot in hospitals before I went to the university. And one of the things that I focused on, even in my early administrative years, was program evaluation, program development, and accreditation. And a lot of the work I do with the UN is policy work and program development and evaluation stuff. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, my background. I don't know if you, oops. I don't know. I don't want you to read this. I just put up some quick points. I have done quite a bit of international work besides working with the UN. As Shirley had mentioned, I've done a couple projects in Kigali, in Rwanda, and I've done projects in the Caribbean, in Dubai, and some other places. A lot of it has been, again, program development, distance education stuff, sort of generally analyzing the situations in the country to see how they're set up for nursing and midwifery. So that's kind of how I think the UN finally contacted me. I was shocked when in about 2000 I got a call from Washington to ask me if I would represent Canada at an international health conference in Mexico City. Who, me? Anyway, they were really interested in how we could expand opportunities for health professionals for education, and because at that time I was director of nursing at Athabasca University and had focused on distance education for my doctoral program, I guess that's why they contacted me. Anyway, that was kind of the beginning of my work with PAHO, which is the Pan American Health Organization section of the WHO. And I worked with them for till about 2012 was my last kind of trip to the Caribbean on their behalf. With that work I did, I worked a lot with the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, and when I started there back in 2000, they didn't have a nursing degree at all. So I helped them develop the program proposal and get funding and kind of move it forward through the university. So now, they actually, by 2012, they already had PhD program, and students were already graduating from the PhD in nursing, so that was a very successful endeavor. Then in 2006, I was asked if I would go to Geneva to work with the WHO at headquarters office in Geneva. And that was a very interesting experience. I actually got a chance to visit all the UN agencies while I was there, and did quite a bit of work again on program evaluation. They were looking for some work on that. I can tell you a little bit more about that later. Oh, Emerald. So in 2015, they contacted me to ask me if I'd be interested in doing some work for the Eastern Mediterranean region. And so that's when I started my project in Kuwait and then subsequently in Iraq. So I just wanted to point out, some people don't understand that what PAHO means, for example. Canada belongs to PAHO. Canada, all the Americas belong to the Pan American Health Organization and the Caribbean. So there's actually, I think 49 countries. I can't remember how many countries are involved, but their head office is in Washington. And then, so I was sponsored, my first visit to Jamaica was sponsored by the Canadian government and WHO. Just quickly. And then when I was at the headquarters, after I did that first stint with them, then they continued to ask me to be involved in all kinds of different policies in relation to nursing and midwifery and health professionals actually in general. So I've been very, very fortunate. I've been asked to go to Brazil for the big conference on health workforce planning. It was a meeting by invitation only, so I felt pretty privileged. And then I was asked to go back to Geneva in 2012, I think it was, to help them with developing midwifery educator competencies. So that was another very interesting project. And then I was selected to be a member of the technical task force on that project. And then I guess the next biggest thing that I was most involved in was developing the nurse educator competencies, global nurse educator competency framework. So that was really great. Oh, and actually about that nurse educator project, I just was asked to review a paper by somebody who's developing a nursing program in Bangladesh for using all open education resources, and they're linking their program with those nurse educator competencies. So I felt that was actually one of the first times something actually is being applied. Because sometimes when you do work, as you probably all know, for some of these big organizations, you do a lot of work, but you feel like you're spinning your wheels because nothing ever happens. And I'm sure you've heard people saying, the UN is just meetings after meetings after meetings. Well, it is, definitely. So now, so in 2015, I was asked to go to Kuwait to develop a strategic plan, a research plan for nursing and midwifery. And that was very humbling experience because that was my first time actually in Kuwait. And Kuwait is a really nice place. Lots of Canadians there, even people from Saskatchewan. So that was great.
Flat, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's actually, it's a very safe place to be, so it was very nice. Then in 2016, I was asked to go to Iraq. And I actually had to think about that because at that time, Iraq was, and still is, considered a very high-risk country. Kuwait was actually considered a high-risk country. It was rated number 3 when I was going. So before UN people are allowed to go to a high-risk country, we have to pass 9 security exams, and I passed them. And then when I was asked to go to Iraq, again, because it's very high risk, I didn't actually have to think about would I go. I immediately said I would, because I kind of wanted to go there. But it wasn't with a little bit of reservation because ISIS was in full force when I went there, and I was when I went, it was about a week after ISIS had been kicked out of Fallujah, and ISIS always retaliates when they lose a battle somewhere, and they usually retaliate on Baghdad. And I was going to Baghdad. So it was, I went on the condition that they promised me, because one of the UN protocols is that consultants can never be left alone in a high-risk country. They always have to be accompanied by a UN person. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't be by myself. So I was fine with that. And that my focus, I want to tell you a little bit about that experience when I landed in Baghdad, when I get to the actual mission part. But so the mission I had at that time was to do a situational analysis of the country and to develop a 10-year strategic plan for nursing and midwifery. And I said, well, my experience with strategic planning is it takes a group. One person can't develop a plan for a whole country, for a whole cadre of nurses and midwives. They said, oh, don't worry about it. We've got nurses in the country that are well educated, they speak English, blah, blah, blah. Well, that was a lie, but I ended up talking pretty well by myself. But anyway, it was an interesting project. And then after that, I was asked to go back for subsequent follow-up plans. So that's kind of how I got to where I am with the current mission. So I just want to say a little bit about some of the environment in the Middle East. The Middle East is way different than some of the other countries that I've worked in or been in, or probably any of you have been in. The challenges with respect to nursing and midwifery is that there's a huge shortage of human resources in those countries. Just generally speaking, there's a shortage. In Iraq, the challenge is even 100-fold more, because they've been at war with somebody for the last 30 or 40 years. Always there's conflict going on there. So back in the 90s, I guess, most of the nurses that were there working from other countries, they all left. There's no nurses, expats there now. It's only Iraqis. And there are not that many Iraqi nurses that are working. There's large, huge populations. Even with all the people that get killed with the wars, there's still huge populations. In Iraq in particular, there's the fertility rates of 4. Everybody has on average 4 or more kids. So there's a lot of people. I mentioned about the limited resources, not just human resources. There's really limited resources, period. Huge disease burden. There's a lot of lung cancer there. Everybody smokes, almost everybody. Women, men, doctors, nurses, people smoke. And there's a lot of cancer from the war effort. They have whole hospitals built for cancer patients, pediatric cancer patients, the fallout of the chemicals used in war. So I won't go into all the other details, but there's challenges just in the country in general. So what I was asked to do when I was asked to develop the strategic plan was review documents. The WHO has millions of documents, and I learned in my document review that they had hired about 5 other people over the last 20 years, 2 of them, 2 groups of people just before I went, to develop a strategic plan, and no one could do it. And somebody had been hired just the month before I went over there, and she got there. She was only there for about a week, and she just went back. She was from the UK. She was too scared to go to visit hospitals, and I told them if I was going to accept the mission, they had to allow me to go to talk to people. I had to see the environment where nurses are educated, where they work, and what the general population is like before we could even think about developing a strategic plan. So they were not too keen, because it was pretty risky, but they finally agreed. I said I wouldn't go if I was not going to be allowed to do it properly, so they agreed. And then, so the person who was at that time responsible for all of the health workforce issues in the country was located in Baghdad. He was from Egypt. Originally, he was a doctor. So I shared the UN offices in the green zone in Baghdad. So my second day there, so my third day there, I was booked to go to the far south, Basra, which was close to Fallujah, where the last big conflict had taken place. And so my second day there, this guy that was supposed to accompany me told me that he wasn't coming, so I had to go all by myself to Basra. So I was not real happy. Well, I was kind of happy because the first day and a half I spent with him, he is a doctor. How many doctors are in the room? One of the biggest issues in Iraq is medical domination. It affects everything. And he was absolutely dominating my whole time when I was there by medical stuff and by his own agenda. So when he told me that he wasn't going to come, I said, good, because I'm probably going to do way better without you there. And it turned out I did. So once I got to the airport, which was a big issue because it's a huge airport, I don't speak any Arabic. I don't read Arabic either. But the doctor who met me in Basra was a female doctor, very, very, very well versed in nursing and midwifery issues. So she was fantastic. So that's how I started my situational analysis. I started there, and then I made site visits, as you can see up there. I had 52 meetings in 38 days. I was running, and I traveled right across the country, from the far south to the far north, back to Baghdad, and back to the north again. So I was really busy. I had long, long days. And I had 4 big consultation meetings all across the country as well. So this is, I don't know if you can see that picture or not, but that was my first meeting with one of the ministries in Basra. And as you can see, not everybody's sitting down, but all of the people represented at that table, except for the nurse. That nurse there is the director of nursing at the Ministry of Health in Baghdad. And the man beside her is the nurse educator at the Ministry of Health in Baghdad. When the head guy from the UN for the Mediterranean region found out that I was left to travel on my own, which is a huge violation of US policy, he contacted these guys at the ministry and said they had to go to Basra and had to be with me while I was there, because I'm not supposed to be by myself. But it was great because they should have been there anyway. This is actually their strategic plan. But anyway, what I was going to mention is you can see that not everyone's sitting down, but everybody else, they're all men. And they all represent nursing and midwifery. And 50% of the population or over is women. And 50% of the educators are women. The rest are men. 50% of the nurses are women, the rest are men, because of the culture there. But anyway, that kind of shocked me when I got there and saw, oh my God, I'm dealing with all these men. And nothing against men, but midwifery is women, and only women. And so that was half of my job, was to deal with midwifery as well as nursing. But it turned out okay, because I was able to get a lot of information. But I just wanted you to see an example of what it's like. It's very formal, yes?
So which one's the interpreter?
The doctor who I was working with, she mainly did the interpreter. I didn't have an interpreter with me. And the guy, Mr. Abbas, this big guy here, he could speak pretty good English. And he was actually really smart and knew a lot about what was going on in nursing in the country. So he really helped a lot. He unfortunately died during my second visit, I think, he had bone cancer and died very quickly. I was sad about that because he was really great to work with. The other person, she's a director of nursing, but there you get appointed positions depending on if you are friends with the government, not whether you're qualified. She did have a PhD, I don't know where from, but she couldn't speak any English at all, and she had zero capacity as far as being able to even speak about policy. So it was challenging for her, I'm sure, certainly challenging for me, because she was identified as one of the key people I would be working with to develop the plan. This is just some other visits I made to, because I went to hospitals, and we went to a couple of colleges, educational institutions, and had meetings with nurses and so on, midwives. This guy, the man who's standing up here, he's the doctor that I worked with in Urbale. And that turned out to be very fortuitous because he didn't know I was coming to Iraq. Nobody told him. And he was the primary contact person for WHO for the Kurdistan region of Iraq. So he did basically the same role as the doctor from Egypt that I had been working with in Baghdad. So when he came to the plane to meet me, he said, "You'll never believe this." I said, "What?" He said, "I didn't even know you were coming until yesterday." I said, "Oh, I'm not surprised." But anyway, it turns out that he was a refugee from Kurdistan years ago, and he lived in Alberta. So he said, "My wife landed in Edmonton today, and you're landing here today, the very same time." So it was very, very interesting, and he's a fantastic person to work with. He was fluent in English, Arabic, and Kurdish. So he's great. He's ended up being promoted to the role that the Egyptian guy got booted out of after his experience with me. Or my lack of experience with him. Oh, this is just some other, to show you. I don't know, you probably can't see anything.
Yeah, no, I can. Thank you.
What can I say? Nothing to say about the pictures. One of the most interesting things at my very first hospital visit was a pediatric intensive care unit in Basra. And I said, "Oh, okay." Then I remembered somebody from the Ministry of Health had told me, "We don't have any nurses in this country. Everybody calls themselves nurses, but there are no nurses." So I asked her, "Well, how did you get to be the head nurse?" And she said, "Well, I was doing my degree in agriculture, and we had a very big shortage of nurses because this is when all the issues were going on with Saddam Hussein. And he said, we need nurses, so anybody who had any college education was going to be a nurse. So they went into the hospitals and they were trained by the nurses who were there. The nurses who work in the hospitals are primarily graduates from grade 9. They graduated, first they graduated at grade 6, and they became the nurses, and then grade 9, and now grade 12. So grade 12, there's still a lot of people working in the hospitals that have grade 12 education. And they're nursing, they were never supposed to be nurses. They were trained to be health workers, and they were trained by doctors. But as soon as they got into the hospital, everybody called them a nurse. So everybody's a nurse. And they have, now they have college education and university schools of nursing. But they're all called nurse, and they're all basically paid the same salary, and they have almost exactly the same job descriptions. So it's kind of bizarre, very bizarre situation. Well, that's just a picture of one of the hospitals in Basra. And you can see the one with the babies. Okay, so the first shocking thing to me was in Basra, there were no nurses in the hospital. And no, that was the second shocking thing. The first shocking thing was, it was 52 degrees Celsius, and there were hundreds of people lined up coming from Fallujah and some of the other areas that had been affected by ISIS. They walked in this heat, and they were standing in line at the hospital doors for hours, sometimes days, with nothing, no food, no water, the babies. It was incredible, just incredible to see the lineup of people waiting. And once they got into the hospital, there was nobody there. I mean, if they were lucky, they might have one nurse in the hospital who had started the IV, but family members all stayed. Nobody went home because they were all too afraid of what might happen to their patients in the hospital. And besides, they had nowhere to go. So this looks really clean, but all the hallways and the rooms were filled with people laying on the floors sleeping because they had walked all that way, and they were staying there, and they stayed there like for days or weeks if they had to. So you had to kind of stumble over people to get to see a patient. Most of the beds had 2 or 3 patients in them. I don't know if I ever saw one with one patient, maybe one. One was a 16-year-old woman who had had a stroke because of all the stress. There's high levels of stress, high levels of suicide in women, young women. This is, this is when I got to the Kurdistan region. The Kurdistan region of Iraq, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Iraq history, but Kurdistan was taken over by Iraq, I forget what year, a long time ago. Anyway, so it's the Kurdistan region of Iraq now. We don't ever just say Kurdistan. So KRI is what it's called. And it's interesting, there's a big difference I was shocked actually at the difference between Kurdistan and the southern part of Iraq, because the southern Iraq general is desert and oil wells. Kurdistan was like going into Victoria, BC. It was absolutely stunning. I couldn't believe it. I mean, we stopped for coffee along the way, and this doctor said to me, Dr. Ammer, he says, "What are you thinking?" I said, "I can't believe I can hear birds singing, dogs barking, flowers growing. It's like normal." He said, "It's way different on this end." And when we got to Erbil, which is the capital, the first day we got there, driving over this hill, which is totally lush and green, and there were Ferris wheels. They had a fair going on. It was so cool, and they had soft ice cream and everything. I'm going, yay! This is so great. So I spent a lot of time in the north, actually. So what was I going to say? Oh yeah, these are just the pictures of some of the consultation meetings I had. So in Iraq, everything's political. So setting up meetings is a big job because you have to consult with the government to find out who can be invited, who will be allowed to come. And I had a little bit of say in that because I knew the type of people that I had to talk to and consult with to be able to come up with a plan. But it really depended if they were in the Kurdistan side or the Iraq side. So things had to be planned kind of carefully. It's very political. So some of the challenges. For nursing and midwifery, but this actually is for all health professionals. There's no governance. The health system is broken, like really, really broken. I won't go in details of it, but there isn't really a healthcare system. It's just bizarre. So that's one of the big issues for nursing. There's no leadership. The nurse in the Kurdistan region who was director of nursing, she could speak some English, but she was not motivated. She didn't have a good relationship with the Ministry of Health. So she, even if she had been motivated, she had no power. And the one in Baghdad had no power. So they have no good nursing leadership at all. There are few really good hospital administrators that are not nurses, but they are very supportive of nursing and midwifery. So I'd seen some of those hospitals, mostly in the north, that were well run, very clean, had good equipment. They were able to get donor dollars, so they were good. But governance is bad. Lack of regulation. There's no such thing as a registered nurse in Iraq. There is no registration body. There's no licensing body, no certification body, not for any of the health professions. So nurses can do anything, but they're not allowed to take blood pressures. They do IVs, they do cut downs, they do medications, they do anything that has an invasive element to it.
But they can't take.
Doctors don't trust them to do a blood pressure. And anyway, it looks sexy to have the stethoscope hanging on you, and the doctors like to wear those stethoscopes. So nurses, it's very weird, bizarre. They're very good technicians. Nobody gives patients a bed bath. No one does nursing assessments. So some of the hospital administrators were telling me that they actually had to get the cleaning staff to help patients get washed up. So, like I said, there's no regulation. The scope of practice is bizarre, to say the least. Information systems. Now, they have spent millions of dollars to develop information systems for the health system. Nurses were never involved. The information's all controlled by doctors, so they decide what's going to be counted, what's going to be released. So it's really, people don't have information to make good decisions, even if they could make them, which usually they don't have the power anyway. I mentioned the shortage before. Weak education system. They've got like 4 or 5 levels of nurses that aren't even really nurses. The biggest challenge is all those things I mentioned are big challenges. To some extent, are challenges throughout the world. But the biggest challenge in Iraq is conflict, violence, and corruption. The corruption is just astounding. I mean, I was supposed to be back in Iraq again in 2018, 2019, just last month. But because of all the conflict that's going on there right now, there's a civil uprising because of the political corruption. No jobs, no money. So that's really the biggest issue, and it affects everything. Done? Okay, the successes. My strategic plan was approved by the Ministry of Health. That was huge. And I was also able to identify some really key nursing leaders, which in my mind was the most important thing for me, to find people in the country. So I influenced the WHO to actually hire this nurse, Eva, that I met while I was there in the Kurdistan region, to do training for the nurses now, and now she's doing it. So that was a real big bonus. The World Health Organization has identified 2020 as the year of the nurse and midwife, which is big, but also there's a big international conference in March for nurses and midwives in the Kurdistan region. And it's actually being organized by that nurse, Eva. Her and the university, there's an American university that just opened up there. And I'm one of the speakers in March. So just ongoing work. I've done, several projects along the way after that first one, and I'm going back again in March. This image was one of the first patients I saw in Iraq. It was a 6-month-old, a few months old baby. It had an adult oxygen mask on its face, and For people who don't have a medical background, you can't see what's wrong with this picture, but that baby probably will be blind because of oxygen blowing on his eyes, and probably not getting adequate oxygen through the mask because they don't have a mask that fits babies. And the fact that that baby is there in the first place is directly due to the war and the conflict that's going on in that country. And that image I think about all the time. Even now, when I think about Iraq, I don't think about all the other things. I think about this kid and wondering if it's growing up or not. Yes?
So what is the training of the doctors? Are they political appointments or are they formally trained elsewhere?
Yeah, they have a lot of doctors that are trained out of the country.
Okay.
A lot of doctors. In some hospitals, there are 4 doctors to every nurse. You know, we always say there's a shortage of doctors here. There's too many doctors.
I want to thank you for your frankness in sharing the challenges and the way that you were describing is very rich. And so thank you for that. My question is, how did you navigate the politicalness of it? Like, did you feel like you had to be cautious, and were you censored? So that strategic plan that was finally approved, was it quite massaged by the time it got there, or was it the essence of what you wrote that got approved?
Good question. I'm pretty direct.
Yes, I get that.
So my situational analysis was very direct.
Okay, you felt comfortable doing that, then good, yeah.
I told them, if you want me to do this, it has to be my way or I'm not doing it.
I love it.
So anyway, you have to be careful as a UN person. You have to be diplomatic, but you can still say what you mean. So I was worried about that, actually, because UN people can see it. They always have to see it before it gets released to the Ministry of Health. And the first person to see it was that guy from Cairo, and he said, it's pretty blunt. I said, well, what did you want me to say? It is what it is. He said, is it that bad? I said, you've never went to the ministry. When I went back in the next year for the implementation meeting, the guy from the Ministry of Health said to me, Joy, I've got to tell you something. I said, what? He said, I read your situation analysis, and I've got so many things underlined. I said, what? I made mistakes? He said, no. You have the most accurate description of our country I've ever seen. Oh. And I said, well, thank you, because I was pretty blunt. but you do have to be a little bit diplomatic.
Yeah.
But I have to say, the government, the Ministry of Health, they were open with everything. I could see whatever I wanted to see. I could go wherever I wanted to go. I had to wear bulletproof vests when I was in Baghdad. But
well, thank you very much, and on behalf of all of us, for this insight into some of the issues, particularly when you don't engage professionals in the work that they do, or train professionals to do the work that they need to do. So that's, I think, a lesson for all of us. And please continue this work. It seems just incredibly essential.
thank you.
Thank you.
Out of my question time?
I've got 2 more questions. Okay. Anyone else?
What about the sterilization protocol? Do they have one?
Okay, isolation. So infection control is interesting. Infection control is done by the doctors who give antibiotics to every patient who comes into the hospital. They do prophylactic antibiotics so people don't get infections, but they do get infections. Like everybody there, not everybody, but many people are getting infections that can't be controlled now because of overuse of antibiotics. Right. But that was one of the big issues. I had some other pictures I could have showed you, but I didn't want to. Infection is a big problem.
One picture you had there, the destruction there, you see that in war, you see it on the media, and like Syria would be a good example. Did you run across a lot of that?
Yes, when I went back to Mosul, well, Baghdad has been destroyed. There's lots of destruction in Baghdad. But in Mosul, I went to Mosul last year. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. The buildings that were hospitals, schools, universities, they were all destroyed. And any of the cultural buildings were destroyed. Yeah, it's very sad, actually. Yes.
One last question.
Yeah, just from a comment, it seems that for the World Health, the UN, who was announcing their support for countries with it, regarding the coronavirus, they're talking about focusing it on some of their announcements and some of their rules and resource allocations were focused on countries with few health resources to contain it. I obviously this is one of them. What would they do with coronavirus in that situation?
Thank God they don't have it, but they do have high infection rates regardless.
Yeah.
They do have hospitals. They have, what I think they might do if they had an outbreak of corona there's a couple hospitals that were built that have never been used because they didn't have any staff. They have equipment sitting in them, but they're all empty. They could actually use a hospital like that. The biggest problem would be staffing.
All right. Joy, thank you.
And by the way, I just came back from Vietnam yesterday, and everybody's wearing masks. Three layers of masks.
We're heading there on Monday, so talk to you.
Announcements, survey. Sean, can you give me 30-second Reader's Digest version of a survey that we'll be sending out shortly?
Yes, we have money left over from the Cenotaph project that was returned to us, and we would like the club's guidance on how that money should be looked upon.
Yeah.
We want to know short-term, mid-term, long-term, how much you think we should try to move right away, how much we should put away for a rainy day, and what are some of the projects already undertaken by the club that you would like to see continued support, and do you have any ideas for if you could put a project together of your own, this is what you would like to see that funds redirected to?
So you'll be getting an email with a link soon, and it's an anonymous survey, so you won't have, if you want to be brutally honest, you don't have to worry about your name showing up. So watch for that. Dave Birkenhagen, raffle tickets, what would you like to say?
Just the raffle tickets for the WestJet draw, I have them, and actually I'll be missing the next meeting, so Kelly now has them. And so the common books at 10, and I think most of you now have tickets, so, but if you do need more, please contact Kelly over the next month.
Okay.
Question?
Yes.
Could we have the little write-up like you did last year for raffle tickets and for the tickets to attend the event? It worked so well last year.
When you reference a you mean like a paragraph?
Yeah, the little write-up, what it's to be used for, like you did last
Okay.
year. And that
The
was-
answer is yes. I'll work with you, Dave, and the Traveling Mabels will get something out to you. Please.
May 1st.
Okay. Integrity Awards, Daryl, quickly.
Yeah, again, March 18th at the Chateau Lacombe, drinks at 6:30, event at 7. We've already filled 2 tables of 8, working on a third now because we're a couple people into that, so I'm looking for 6 more people to get it. If you wish to go, just let me know. And tickets are $63.40, including the service charge. We have our winner, or our nominee, or our recipient, and that's Cornell Rusnick from the Beverly Business Association. I ran across his write-up accidentally in the Beverly paper, and it's just amazing. This guy's got decades of community work, and it's just amazing how he continues to volunteer. And we have good exposure with them because, of course, our club was involved with the Cenotaph, a little bit of Beverly business. Shirley has obviously been involved with them through her work in Beverly over the years, and of course I'm a Beverly kid, so it's quite a natural thing. So if anybody's interested in attending, let me know.
February birthdays, Peter Zeeland, February 11th. Is it a big one, Peter? Or are they all big?
No, not big anymore.
Bill Metcalf, February 12th. And Daryl Martin, who's not here, is February 24th. Sergeant at Arms. Do we have time for Sergeant at Arms?
No.
We don't have.
Yeah, this is going to be real quick, so I'm just going to rattle them off and then you pay your money.
No, we need a story. And there isn't a story.
Okay, Carl.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, put it in.
Throw it at you.
Yeah. First of all, asking if there was any dessert left to myself while in line. That was a big one. And secondly, your phone going off during the meeting. So that'll be $2, please, Carl. Daryl, Jackie. Well, first of all, forgetting about your wife.
Yeah, she's my golf partner.
How could you forget a sweater that color? For the matching sweaters, that'll be $2, please.
Daryl doesn't have money.
No, if you okay, if you keep quiet, sooner or later she's gonna quit coming to Rotary.
Welcome, John. I think this is the first time we met. $2, please. John Nico, on the John theme. Our table went second. That'll be $2.
What?
$2. Pay up. Bert,
Because he paid up, I had to pay up?
you got to pay up too. And
If I-
Michelle,
if I make it five,
for
will you
being
make it five?
temperature challenged, that'll be $2.
Oh, that's.
That was all I know. Thank you, Dave. Let's do that. That's everything.
All right, do we have time for Polio Plus? Quickly, yep.
We have to have time because we had a big haul today. Lots of tickets sold.
I have to do the quick spiel because we've got lots of first timers here. We get money for polio education through our 50-50 draw. The way we do it is not when you draw, your ticket gets drawn, you get the money or half the money. We actually give you a chance to draw the joker out of the deck of cards. But if you draw that one, you're actually going to get the accumulated pot. The bad news is I won the pot not long ago, so it's not that much in it, but it's better than otherwise would be the case. Anyway, Joy, can I ask you to draw a ticket? Yeah, you can.
That would be okay.
All right, $75.
You still got it.
The last 3 digits? 265.
That's me!
Oh yes, Quiet Reserve Kelly, once again.
Thank you!
So
Oh, no, I know what, I didn't win yet.
No, we won because you have a chance, right? I did check, there is a joker in here.
All right, you
I
sure?
also checked there's quite a number of cards. But good luck.
Oh.
It's close but no cigar. Thank you.
Better luck next time. We're home stretch, folks. Hang tight. We're just about there. Just thanks again to Jan Mustard Seed. We had it on January 28th, and I apologize I didn't mention it in my president update letter, but a big shout out for Jan for organizing that. Wednesday, February 19th is our next evening meeting. Our next meeting, Jennifer Lawton from the Youth Exchange to PhD to Russia with Love is our guest speaker. Friday, March 6th at 12 noon, we're here. It's our first meeting in March. Leah Kongsrud is Executive Director of North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance. Really interesting lady. I highly recommend her. And we're going to have to move yours to the March 19th. So just giving you the heads up. So Thursday, March 19th, John is giving his classification talk. Look forward to that, John.
And we'll be about nursing on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah. And our strategic planning session is Saturday, April 4th. You'll get a note on that. So, we're going to draw this meeting to a close, a rotary toast, so please stand. As we bring this meeting to a close and rejoin our families and the community we serve, let us consider in all the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it bid goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? To Rotary, have a fabulous week, and remember our Rotary theme, Rotary connects the world. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. Who's collecting the,
Who's collecting fines?
The fines. Who's collecting the fines?
Michelle wants to pay a fine.
Shirley.
Okay, Shirley. We leave for Vietnam Monday night.
We will go to today. How long?
So I'm pretty sure I'm just we're involved in corporate education and marketing and
I was so excited.
Is that like a projection of your
John Uni and I will be setting up a committee when I get back from my 3-week holiday to decide who gets the President's Award for this year.
Oh, God, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. So we'll set up.
Okay.
We're going to set up a committee at that time when I
All
get
right.
back. Yeah. Just so you know.
Fantastic, thank you. And enjoy your 3 weeks.
Sure, okay, I'll give you yeah. Oh yeah, but you know what? Because I've gone to China for a number of times through China Connections, teaching English teachers in China, but I haven't used it. So I'm on the board of Edmonton Public Schools. That's that, and this is my business. So Sean and I run a consulting company. We do free planning program values.
Oh, super.
So yeah, if you
Okay, I'll email you.
Sure.
And because I think you get email everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
If, are you going to Denang?
Yes.
Do you know where you're staying?
Do you know where we're staying today?
Where we're staying in Denang?
Yeah.
The itinerary I took pictures of, of course. Oh, geez, no, not
The hotel. I can send you our itinerary.
Yeah.
They just put the hotels.
Yeah, we've got our visas, but I don't have. I just have the flights. I don't have the itinerary.
I stayed at the Grand Prix. The first 4 days I was there, I stayed at another place, but it's closed.